Hi, everybody. I'm Beth Burrell, and today we're going to talk about Dynamics 365 migration and the post-standard migration assessments and what to do once you've already had your assessment done. I'm the Global Biz Apps Cloud Solution Architect and Strategist, and that's a long way of saying that I have a lot of experience with Dynamics 365 in the cloud and on-premise. And I've been working with Dynamics 7 or 8 years now. Before joining Microsoft, I was an MVP, and I worked for a partner. And I've done thousands of migrations from anywhere from 2011 on. I've done also a 4.0 at one time, but 4.0 is a little before my time. Next slide, please. So some things we're going to go over is what was the standard migration assessment. For those of you who've gone through it already, know exactly what it is, but for those of you who haven't, I will do a brief overview. We'll talk about why you should maybe migrate to the cloud and making plans to the cloud, because the cloud is our future. And then what your steps might be to get to the cloud. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session. So let's talk about the migration program, or we called it an SMA. So with doing an SMA, or it's called a standard migration assessment, it actually will look at your system and tell you how your system will go into the cloud. And what you get with this migration assessment is you'll get dedicated Microsoft advisors. It's a lot of people in Microsoft will help you, guide you, and tell you what needs to be done to get to the cloud. You have people from Fast Track, you have technical support, and you'll have someone like me who's an architect to go through the system with you and say, hey, this is how you'll get to the cloud. There's no charge and there's no obligation, so it's a free service. And Microsoft is making the investment into their customers to see them get to the cloud safely and securely, as well as ensuring the less impact on any issues and having them cloud ready when they're about to migrate. So you're not doing this alone. There's a lot of intricacies about moving to the cloud, and you'll have Microsoft there to help you along the way. You'll also get special pricing or transition pricing from on-prem to the cloud. So say you just paid your maintenance last month, there's certain pricing that you'll get to go to the cloud. That will be good, while you're transitioning. And some of you might already have that pricing and are on premise and haven't thought about going to the cloud quickly. But again, these assessments will help you and help you dissect each piece of your Dynamics or CRM system on-prem to go to the cloud. And then there's also a lot of partners and communities that have done migrations already, and they'd love to help out, and they'll use their expertise to get you to the cloud. And we'll give you access to all those different channels to help you understand your migration path. Next slide, please. So if you're doing an SMA, there's a couple steps there's a couple steps that you go through. First is you want to nominate yourself, or you'll have your partner nominate you to go through the SMA. And there's really 4 steps to this. Is once you're nominated, we do a kickoff meeting. Hey, this is what to expect through the process. You'll meet the people who are the specialists. We'll talk to me about a tool we use to analyze your system, and we'll tell you each step along the way so that there's no surprises. That's one thing we don't want, is any surprises with any of our customers. So once we did that, we'll have you review your system with us. And what happens, there's a tool that goes through your database, and it only takes the metadata. It won't take any of your personal data. It just takes your infrastructure of your CRM system, and it puts it into a zip file. And what that does is that's just saying, okay, I have this many entities, I have this many tables, this is how large my database is, this is how many plugins I have, this is how many custom code. So that tool is just gathering some of the metadata. And then we also would like you to show us a demo of your system. And the reason why we do the demo is because there's a lot of things that metadata tool does not collect. For example, if you're using some kind of thing like Scribe or Kingswaysoft, we can't see that system because it's not installed within your CRM database. It just migrates some data or moves data from one system to the other, but the metadata doesn't see it. It just sees it's data's appeared there. There's nothing installed. It'll also find your ISVs but that can be done with a tool because that's actually within your CRM database. And then we will review your findings. What happens is we have a huge report, which we'll show you in a second, that shows you all the different areas, and it will show you how hard or how difficult each area will be to migrate to the cloud. And lastly, we'll talk about what are your next steps. How do we get you to the cloud? What will be your path, and if it's going to be hard or difficult, or if it's going to be easy. And we'll do a high level estimate of time and certain things that will happen, because if your CRM is just like more like an XRM where it's all customized, and then it's going to be a harder path to the cloud than if you have a vanilla CRM system that you haven't really maybe added a few entities and a few workflows. That's easier to get to the cloud than if you did a lot of coding and a lot of changes to the menu system. Next slide, please. So if you look from here, how many people are 2011, 2013, 2015, 2016? We do this from 2011 up. If you're using CRM 4.0, this SMA, we can still work with you with our fast track program to do an analysis, but this SMA will not run on a 4.0. Hopefully there's not many of you out there anymore, but 2011 and up. And I actually joke around that people who are on 2011, CRM 2011, have an easier time migrating than people who are on 2015, because the menu system is similar, and we'll get to that in a second. But again, if you're doing 2011, 2013, 2015, and 2016, this SMA is for you. So you don't have to be on the latest greatest to do the SMA. So what the SMA, it covers all these different areas: the environment, the workstation, configuration, kind of like are you using server-side sync or email router, integrations, as we talked about before. Are you pulling data from AX? Are you pulling data from another system? ISVs, if you're running any of the different ISVs like Click Dimensions or any of these other ones that might be out there. It'll do, again, your database size, what are the largest tables. Usually the largest tables are attachments or activity pointer, and then maybe your logs. Those are usually the largest. And this will give you a list of what the breakdown of the tables and how large they are. It'll talk about custom code. It doesn't go down to the point where it says, hey, on line 3 of this custom code is broken. It'll just tell you you have all this custom code and that you might have to convert it to work in the cloud. And we also talk about what's deprecated and what's not deprecated. Processes, workflows, different things that are happening within your system. Reports are one of the biggest things that don't go over well. You cannot do a one-for-one reports, because online it's all fetch XML. If your reports are fetch XML, then they'll go over fine. But if you're using, SSRS or something like that, then we would have to do some conversion. We look at your security, make sure that your security roles, we have people who have 10,000 security roles and people who have 5, and we look at that to see how complex that would be to move. And then the infrastructure, and that's more, what's going on with your infrastructure, will it work well with the cloud and how it's working. And as you say, we have 3 levels that we look at: green, amber, and red. Green obviously means, hey, everything's a go. It's pretty easy to move online and there's not an issue. Amber means maybe there's some complexity. Maybe the issue is, maybe it'll work and maybe it won't. We've really got to delve into that a little more. But for example, if, you're working on your workstation and you have Windows 7.0, right? Or Windows 7 doesn't work, it's outdated. It's not available anymore, really. So we might talk to you about upgrading those, because it will work, but there's some issues. If using Internet Explorer 11, it will work, but it's not, are some issues. So those are the kind of things that we'll talk about in amber. Maybe that, hey, it might work, but it's probably not the best way to move forward in the future. And then red means, hey, it's complex. You have a lot of code maybe that needs to be upgraded. You might be using some deprecated features. Those are what will be red, is, hey, these might have to be replaced once you're in the cloud. These are the things you have to concentrate on the most when you're migrating to the cloud. Can we go to the next screen, please? And what happens is in each of these areas, we go into a deep dive. So there's several sections within, for example, environment. We look at your workstation. Again, as I said, if your workstation is an old version, it might come up amber or red, depending on how old it is. For example, it looks at Outlook, what browsers, things that I just talked about. And I'll tell you, like I said, we'll give you a big green, amber, or red, and then we'll give you comments on the right-hand side. One of the biggest things that come up red usually in this migration is the new UCI. If you're using 2013, 2015, or 2016, you're using the on-premise menu system. The new menu system is the new UCI. And again, we make it red not because it's complex, but there's a big learning curve. And as you all know, most users hate change, right? They want their icon blue and not red, and they don't want, they're used to seeing their menus across the top. And we all know how ugly 2015 was with the menus that you scrolled to the right for days to get to your menu system. Well, that's no longer there, and the new UCI is such a better system, but your users will complain because it's something different. We also will attach a link to a UCI playbook, so any links that we can help you out with will be listed here as well. Microsoft in their docs has all this information, and for example, there's a UCI playbook that shows you how to help your users learn the new UCI. So this report that we have, the minimum is 21 pages. It really depends how big your environment is, but we have, like I said, each one of these sections on the left-hand side, the environment, workstations, etc., all have subsections that will go into a deep dive to explain whether they will work well in the cloud or not. Like JavaScript, we might say JavaScript will work, but there's certain lines, certain code that is deprecated, and we can go in that a little bit more later. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why migrating and how you make a plan. So as you know, the cloud is everywhere. COVID probably accelerated the use of the cloud for many people because it was a work-at-home scenario. So a lot of the industries have accelerated their use of the cloud. And as you can see, most millennials and Generation Z, they all are on their phones, right? My son's 15 and he lives on his phone. He does not do anything on a PC, even his homework at school. He doesn't want a PC or a laptop to do his homework. He wants to do it on his phone. And so anybody coming out of school, anybody in the workforce now wants to do a lot of their work on the phone. If they're, everybody gets their email on the phone, right? Well, CRM works that easily, or Dynamics 365 in the cloud will work that easily on your phone now, that you can do everything from your phone, whether you use the Outlook client or the mobile client. There's so much good use now from the latest online version that you don't even need a laptop or a PC if you want to use it on your phone. I don't have to read these slides to you, but you'll notice how a lot of these are doing it. Most of you who go into retail, that you see they have the block, right, when they want your credit card, things like that. All that with CRM or Dynamics 365 in the cloud is now tied together. So that's very easily, you can do that from anywhere, any retail store, if you're one of those retail stores that are mobile, you might be doing something out of your car, you might be doing something, in a brick and mortar. They have these pop-ups now, right? These pop-up stores. It's all now Dynamics 365 is all cloud ready, and it works so much easier than if you had on-prem. You'd have to set up a VPN, you'd have to dial in or connect through the internet, and you'd have to set up the security and all that other fun stuff, that overhead that you don't have to worry about anymore once you're in the Microsoft cloud. Next slide. So this is a Forrester report, and it's a little old, but the numbers, the numbers have increased quite a bit from what they have been. So the total cost of ownership is TCO. That's what the acronym stands for. And that is one of your biggest gains, right? You save time. What happens with the cloud? A lot of people get intimidated by it. People who are in IT, oh, well, if you put it in the cloud, what am I going to do? Oh, well, I don't want it on the cloud. I don't have control over the system. Those are all myths. If you put things in the cloud, things that give you time back, you don't have to worry about backups. You don't have to worry about disaster recovery. You can concentrate on the most important things. You don't have to, how long is it going to take me to build a server or a VM? If I need a new VM or I need to update something, all those patching, you just can forget about those and know that Microsoft's going to do it well. So that total cost of ownership, you save a lot of money, and your IT staff, or if you are in IT, you can concentrate on the more important things, right? I remember back in the day when people would have tapes or CDs or disk drives that they backed up to, and then they had to find a fireproof safe or a company that they had to store that with. Now Microsoft does all that work for you. And if you ever need to test, test a backup, they can do that for you as well. There's all that stuff that just is taken off your plate. And again, the savings that you save, a lot of people don't look at the soft dollars, right? What does it do to your IT department if you're not doing all that extra work, right? Maybe you can have one less IT person, or maybe you're, I remember working in IT and you're mostly working 12-hour days, especially if there's a disk problem or there's a system problem, you're working these long hours. So the saving on your time and, the extra people that you'd have to have around to do this, and you're not relying on, a vendor or somebody else besides Microsoft to get this done. Microsoft has uptime. They have your backed up to another, region. You don't have to worry about, all that stuff that you have to worry about when you're on-prem. And then pretty much it takes about 10 months for a payback period. So that's how much quickly you regain all your, investment. And 10 months is easy, right? You're going to be in the cloud for a long time. So, after 10 months, you start saving more and more and more and more. So again, some of the things that are on here is just, it makes your life simple, right? You might have to add a user, but you don't have to, okay, you add the user, then you add them to the CRM, then you add, add the security role. There's a lot of easy things that are quickly done. You just have to go to the security role piece, right? Once you add the user. You saved so much time in things that are mundane. It's not, it's not rocket science work to do some of the stuff. If your job is just data entry, great, this might affect you. But because most people who are in IT, most people who are in systems are, very busy. I used to make a joke that, why I got an IT, because if a CRM system is down in the middle of the night, I'm not the one being called. It's usually the IT person. So it just saves, a lot of time. If, Microsoft rarely has any kind of outage, their uptime is amazing, and you don't have to worry about it being down. You don't have to worry about it if, okay, something's crashed. You don't have to worry about, oh God, do I have a backup? Are my backups working? This is all things that really make it, okay, make it nice to go into the cloud. Scalability. If your company, how many companies get merged and bought out? It's easier to upgrade, easier to merge when you're in the cloud. It's not, you get to be the coordinator, but you don't have to actually do the work. And again, I'm not going to go through all these numbers, but you can see this is, it's only gone higher and higher with every year. And as you know, with COVID, this is pre-COVID numbers. With COVID, everybody's gone to the cloud. We've seen a huge uptake in people going into the cloud. Think about it. I lived in Florida, which is hurricane country. And I remember the day that we had one summer where we had like 5 hurricanes that were coming through. And every night we had to, every week before, as during the cone, I call it the cone of shame, the cone for the hurricane, we had to start planning for disaster, right? Okay, are our backups working? Do we have a good backup? Where's everybody going to go? The people who are critical that have to work, where are they going to go? Where are they going to work from? Where are we going to put our servers? Can we put up servers somewhere else? All these answers are gone, or all these questions are gone when you go to the cloud. You have to find somewhere to work that has internet, but Microsoft's taking care of everything else. And again, you will be surprised how much this takes off your plate, and your company plate, and you sleep better at night knowing that your data secure and you don't have to worry about it. And this way, now in Florida, if hurricanes come, all I have to do is make sure I have internet somewhere, or my hotspot's on my phone, and I work in my CRM system. And even if I do work on even though I do work on a laptop, normally, if my internet's down, I can actually go on my phone with a mobile app or Outlook and work that way as well. So I do it every day. I work on my phone with CRM every day. It's just an easy transition. So now we're going to talk about some of the things for the post assessment. So what we have is we have a on-prem to online factory. And if your system is not overly complex, like if you haven't changed everything, most clients and most customers are candidates for the on-prem to online factory. There is no minimum. This is a free service to every client. And what happens is they use LCS. Basically, you would take a backup of your system, upload it to LCS. Microsoft will upgrade it to you from the version you're on, like I said, 2011 and up, and it'll upgrade. You don't have to upgrade on-prem. They will upgrade you all the way to the latest and greatest. And my technical term is to plop it into your sandbox. And then from there, you can test it. And they will do this as many times. These 4 steps will be done as many times as you'd like. Obviously, if you get to 50 times, they're gonna be like, okay, now what? They won't be as, quick to do it. But they're the best people that I've seen, and they answer all your questions. They'll work with you on some remediations if there are issues with getting it into the cloud. But you will need to work with your partner or your internal company if there's code that needs to be changed or plugins that need to be altered. But once it's in your sandbox, that's when the remediation begins. Like I said, the biggest challenge you have is the UCI. This is where you also want to get your users involved so they can start playing with it. Then you would do your test. And again, now it's just like any other project you're doing. You want to do your UAT. Don't just test it for 5 seconds. Don't say, oh, hey, this works. Have your users test it. Do a day in the life. This is my recommendation because my mantra is your go live is only as successful as your user testing. If you don't do any user testing, your go live is going to be crazy and people are going to be pinging you all day long. If you do a day in the life, then your go live is going to go much smoother. Have each of your core users testing the system out. And the other thing people don't test are, hey, what do you do once a month, once a year? The testing is going to be key. And then you want to make sure you're educating your users, right? The training on the UCI and other things. You might want to have champions or the go-to people, depending how large your organization is. You might have to go-to people to actually, hey, I can't find this menu option, or hey, how do I do this? Or this is not working. And then you start over again until you feel like you're in a good spot, right? We recommend doing it at least twice, once to work out the bugs, and second time to look at timing, because once you have it in your sandbox, whatever remediation needs to be done, that might take some time. Some of it might be as simple as putting it in the solution and then, export the solution and then re-import it when you have the newest database. But others, there's going to be certain things that you have to do real time. So like I said, the first time is to run through to make sure you have everything fixed. The second time is you're testing. Okay, how long is this going to take me? And once I put these fixes in, is it still working as I just liked it? And lastly would be the go live. And the go live is obviously the most important, and fast track the on-prem to online factory will work with you on timing, so you know what to expect and you know how much downtime you can have with your users. Next slide. So this is a little bit more about the process, and just we wanted to carve out what you need to expect from your customer, or from your company or from your partners. So what happens is Microsoft creates a project, an LCS project. They put all your information in that you've gotten. Either we do it from the SMA or any information you give to us. The migration factory gets involved and does an introduction call with you to tell you exactly what to expect. And our migration factory is amazing. Praveen and his team just do the best they can, to make sure all your questions are answered. They send you a lot of documentation, what like user mapping and whatnot, because you don't lose your GUIDs when you go to the cloud. They make sure it maps right so you don't lose your GUIDs. Then we go through the backup and upload like we talked about in the previous slide. And then, they once it's backed up, you let them, hey, I backed it up and it's up there waiting for you. They do the process. They ask for the user mapping and map the users. And then your migration complete. Again, that might be just the test, but this is the process you go through all the way through to go live. And in the dark blue is what you need to mitigate or your partner needs to mitigate before you can go live. Again, we talked about the customizations. You want to make sure all your customizations are working correctly. Update solutions. If you're running any ISVs, you're going to need to get the latest and greatest, because if you're using an old version of, say, ClickDimensions, you need to get the newest cloud version of ClickDimensions. Your data will come over fine, but they will work with you to make sure that's correct. Same as most ISVs. Most ISVs have a newer version to go into the cloud. And if they don't, then you need to talk to that vendor to see if their version will work in the cloud. Reconfigure integrations. So if you were running the email router, that no longer exists, that's deprecated, so you would need to configure server-side sync. If you're on a Scribe or Kingfacesoft, you need to change the endpoint because you can no longer go straight to the database. And those need to be reconfigured to point to the correct API within Dynamics 365 Online to make sure they work. There shouldn't be that much tweaking on those. It's just the endpoint definitely has to be changed and tested. Again, anything new that you've come up with, a lot of people are adding new features as they go live. So going to the new features, that's where you want to, check. That's from you and your partner. That's what you have to decide. Microsoft does not do that. Again, we talked about the transition to unified interface, and we mentioned that so many times because it is a big change. And then user onboarding. So you want to, make sure your users are trained. If you leave the users to their own devices, they're going to be unhappy. And really, if you start off with an unhappy user, they're going to complain and complain and complain. And again, so you want to make sure your users understand how to get to the system. If they're using multiple places like mobile or laptops, you want to train them on all the systems to make sure they know how to get to the data they're looking for. And then you're ready to go live. But again, my biggest mantra, and I'll say it one more time, your go live is only going to be as good as your user testing. If you don't do user testing, then your go live is going to be, you're going to be doing a Chinese fire drill, right? You're going to be running around like a chicken without a head. It's just, if you can work out all your problems before go live, then go live, Murphy shows up everywhere. But you want a smooth go live so you can concentrate on the important issues and not, people asking questions on how do I or where can I find, and that's huge. So using the factory, they are some of the smartest people I know. They're very technical. They can point you in the right directions. Obviously, in this fixing customizations and the solutions, they won't do for you, but they can help point you in the right directions. Any issues along the way, they can point you in the right direction. Any questions you have, again, we can all point you in the right directions. That's the fun part about using the factory or going online. You have all these Microsoft reps and technologists to help you get to the cloud. I mean, this is not something that you normally get, all these people to help you out. And once, a couple years down the road, if you're still online, I mean, if you're still on premise, who knows how many people are going to remember how to do on-premise to online. I mean, I joke around, but, I'd say a majority of the customers have gone online, and it makes your life easier. It's kind of like those of you who use your phone. You don't think about, okay, where's my data? Who's doing what? Whether it's Verizon or T-Mobile or whatever, you're not questioning that they have your stuff backed up. You're not questioning, okay, I'm using email. Where's my email coming from if it's not work email, right? Your personal email, how many of you make sure it's backed up? How many people, question where it's at? This is the same thing is, you got to make sure, do your diligence, but the cloud is the place to be. If you travel, I mean, I could work from anywhere. We joke around, my son and I joke around about moving to Alaska. I mean, because it's so beautiful, or moving across, the ocean. We can work from anywhere. And that's what the benefit of the cloud, where I remember the old days, right? You had to have a VPN or you had to dial in. Oh God, that was a long time ago, dial in. But you had to have VPN or some kind of connection to get to the data. And here, all you need is the internet. And as you know, with your phone, you have the internet. You don't need to have a special connection. And any other slide? Okay. So these are some things that if you're going to use a partner, and I would suggest that unless you're a big company with a lot of technologists, use your partner. I think most of you have worked with partners or are partners. But questions to ask your partner, how many migrations have you done? Because there are nuances, right? If you call me now and ask what are the nuances, I probably give you the top 10 nuances that I've seen as when I was in the partner channel and as Microsoft, that are migration issues, right? The biggest thing that people forget, and my, like what do I do monthly? Some reports are scheduled to go monthly, and people forget about them because it's not a daily thing. Do they have migration specialists to help? Again, as migrations get more passe, because so many people are going to the cloud, you want to make sure your partner has people with experience in migration. Again, you're not going to have a bicycle specialist fix your car because they know how to change the spark plug. You want someone that's experienced in that specific area. And migration is a specific area. I won't say anything different. It's a specific area. Again, references is a no-brainer, right? You're not going to go to a doctor that doesn't have references or doesn't have a good reputation. So you won't want a partner that doesn't have a good reputation. And then maybe you might want to ask for some of their outcomes, right? Okay, you have how many, migrations under your belt? How many went as planned? And if they say they all went as planned, then I won't believe them because there's always Murphy shows up everywhere. And they can say they have a few hiccups, but nothing goes smoothly or perfectly. There's always a little hiccup there or not there. I've done migration where an icon showed up blue instead of green, and the CEO was more upset about it than anything else. So again, you just want to ask, what are your outcomes? What have you seen the most issues? Those kind of things. And then, timing and migration capacity. Talk about partner incentives. For example, Microsoft's doing this on-prem to online factory right now. They're investing into the customer to move online. Well, does the partner have any incentives for that, or are they working with you? Licensing is huge, right? Licensing is a little different now than it was on-prem. License now a monthly fee, where before you paid maintenance per year. Well, again, you have to do your cost analysis to make sure your value is there. And believe me, most people forget about those soft dollars, right? You're not doing backups, you're not doing DR, you're not having that extra person carry tapes around or make sure the hardware, you don't have to keep the hardware contracts going. There's so many, every 3 years, right? You have to replace your hardware supposedly. So all those things, are soft dollars. So when you're doing your value, make sure you're including all those dollars that are not direct to just the license. Does the partner have the right resources for the planned time frame, right? If you have a partner that has 10 people, that's fine. They might be great, but if all 10 people are on a project that's going to take them a year, are they going to dedicate that time to you? And that's all you want to know, right? If you have a toothache, you don't want to go to the dentist in a year. You want to go to the dentist, next week or tomorrow. So those are the things that you really need to look at. And then post go live support. Okay, what is the partner going to help you with, right? Most partners have paid, pay as you go support. But when you're first going live, how much support are they going to give you? I mean, you definitely want to ask them, okay, to what, they're not going to support you for a year on that migration, right? If you don't have a contract, but how long are they going to support you? Because some things 2 or 3 days down the road come up. And one last thing here, that's not on here is, your upgrades and your patching for the system are done, the major updates are done twice a year, and Microsoft more than publishes those way beforehand, and you don't have to worry about that. How many times have you spent hours updating your system and something doesn't work right, and then you don't know what broke? Microsoft does that for you automatically. And the partners need to be up to date on all the latest and greatest, because there's not a, hey, this in 2011 it did this, but online it does that. They can't, some of the stuff they can correlate, but they got to make sure they're up with the latest and greatest, because there is a roadmap. Microsoft plans well in advance what's coming, and you want to make sure your partner is up to date on the latest and greatest. Because if they don't know what's coming down the road, how are they going to be able to help you make sure you're planning for the future? Because when you upgrade, you want to make sure you're setting yourself up for the future. If you're married and you have no children, and you buy a 2-bedroom house, then you have room for 1 children. But if you're married and children, you're going to have 5 children, you're not going to go buy a 2-bedroom house. Again, these are the things there are things that happen that you don't expect, but things that you want to think about. You want to make sure you're set up for the future. Because if you're going to have 5 children and you buy a 2-bedroom house, you're either going to have to move or build onto the house, correct? So you just have to make sure you know what your plan is for the future. So these are some ways you can get started today. So there's a migration community out there. As we all know, that Microsoft has all these Dynamics 365 communities. They are good for asking questions on anything you have to do with CE or F&O. I know we don't call it that anymore. It's sales, marketing, customer service, and field services, or HR and all those other stuff. So you can ask any question you want, but there is a specific community for migration. So if you have any migration questions, a lot of people on this call will answer them for you. I'll answer it. I have a lot of cohorts that are very knowledgeable on it. Our fast track team, our on-prem to online group, will answer these questions, and it connects you with those experts. So if you have a lot of questions beforehand, you can just ask in that forum. And then you can nominate your partner can nominate you. You can nominate to fast track. You can look on the pages to see what fast track's actually doing, and that's right in the link here that will be shared with you. and Tom, I don't know if you want to take that link and share it in the chat, publish it in the chat, but that this will be a place to ask fast track some questions. And again, with this on-prem to online, I want to state there is no minimum. It's not like the other fast track program where you get an architect. This is for on-prem to online, so you don't have to be a large customer to be accepted to the on-prem to online factory. So I know we ran through that very quickly, and I know I gave a lot of information. Do we have Jamie and Praveen, sorry, on our question answers? Do we have any questions that we want to review?
Yeah, we replied to most of the questions that were posed individually. I think they were answered in general. One question that I think that came up is probably a good one to address, and that is, what happens to the data when we migrate? And just from a high level, what is happening with our OP2OL factory migration is you're effectively taking a backup of your on-premise system, and we're restoring it into our cloud environment and then proceeding with upgrades until you're on the same release as the version that's online. And so all the data and the customizations that you've done are all there in the online environment. Now, because you're on a different version in online, that's where the remediation work has to take place that was mentioned. And you'll do that with your partner. So building your UCI app, doing the changes to the reports, maybe modifying your integrations, things of that nature happen. And when you're all ready and you've built the solution that kind of represents the differences between what your org looks like on premise and what it looks like online, then we work with you to schedule your production migration. And that's where typically it happens on a weekend when users are off the system, and they'll log out Friday and you'll initiate your backup and go through the same process. We'll restore in the online space, do the upgrade to 9. Once it comes online, then you'll restore that solution that has all the fixes in place into that environment. So then, and you'll do some basic testing, and then Monday morning when your users come back in, they can start accessing the online environment. So that's the gist of the process that you'll go through. So all of your audit trail and the data, all that's retained as we move to the cloud using this method.
And one thing I think we've forgot to mention is that it gets moved into the same tenant as your Dynamics or your Office 365 or your Microsoft 365, unless otherwise stated. But it does go into the same tenant, so it's definitely using the same Active Directory.
That's right.
So it is secure to your tenant only. So nobody else has access to it outside of that, unless you give them access.
Yeah. Another thing I'll add here, our factory team is set up to work 24/7. So, we can handle even some of the larger orgs, multi-terabyte orgs to migrate online. There are some differences when they get very large like that, but we've done those. And so in 99% of the cases, you won't have any trouble working with us to move your org online using this method. And we work 24/7 because we run these migrations all through the weekends, and we'll do dry runs during the weekdays around the clock as well. So.
And somebody just posted a question about SSRS and being converted to Fetch XML. They also said, wouldn't Power BI be a better option? And I agree, Power BI is a better option, but a lot of people aren't there yet, and they only want one new thing at a time. So again, we find that reports are hit or miss. Either people have hundreds of reports or they have 10. And so it really depends on how sophisticated the user is and how ready they are for Power BI. A lot of people are using Power BI already. So we mentioned that when we go through the assessment, we just say you need to rethink those reports either using Fetch XML or Power BI. So I agree with you. If you are advanced, Power BI is the newer solution, a better way to do your analytics. But again, everybody's not there yet.
Yeah, thanks. And there's also a question in there, is there some support to cut down on unnecessary data like very old attachments, notes, and activities? And, that's really an activity you would work with your partner to do. And I answer this one here publicly because I'd like to suggest that generally you'd want to do that archival work while the org is still on premise. It's easier to do there. Once you move online, you're paying for the storage that you're using. So you want to have the database that you want to live with and online when you get there. So just consider that.
And just good, Jim.
The process of migration is moving the whole database back up. So there's no, we're not touching your data. So any work related to affecting the records that are kept and those kinds of things needs to be handled between you and your partner before or after migration.
And one thing about those of you who don't know, the data store, the licensing on-prem is very different than online. On-prem, you paid by organization or by org. Online, you pay for disk space, and you get X amount of disk space depending on what license you buy and how many users you have, and that you have to work with your partner or your licensing specialist. But this means that you can have as many environments as you want or many orgs as you want. It's just the minimum for empty org is one gig. So if you have 5 orgs, it's 5 gigs taken up right there. So that's what you need to think about when you're moving to the cloud is, it's a different pricing structure a little bit, but you do want to clean up because there is, and if anybody wants a link, they can just ping me afterwards, but there is a link to show you where your data goes to which part of the database. And Jamie shared that with me several times. When I forget, he beats in my head. But it's, it's just a different way of doing things. So you do want to clean up as much as possible, or you can just, if you don't need to retain, I've had people with 15 years of data in there, or they've had, a lot of old stuff in there. Activity pointers, that's why they get so large, right? So it's things, there's a lot of information out there on how to clean up and how to get rid of certain things, how to move attachments to maybe SharePoint or some other kind of data storage. So there's tons of stuff out there, and I would work, as Jamie said, work with your partner to make sure you're getting the best option. Another question out there, Jamie, I think.
Yeah, I can go ahead and answer the question about the dedicated architect support for engagements. So we've talked mostly about the factory here. The factory is a team that works off of primarily an email alias at this point. So when we're doing the migration work for you, you'll communicate with the team through that alias, and whoever's on shift at the time can respond to you and to your queries. Now, that team is specifically dedicated to helping you with the migrating your org from on-premise to online, and they won't be able to answer any questions for you related to like mitigation work and how to get your integration set up or modifying reports. So generally, you'll be working with your partner there. Now, I'll mention here that there's also a fast track program where there is a dedicated architect for this, for some assistance here. But there's a nomination process as well as a threshold that must be met in order to qualify for that. Primarily what we've been talking about here is the factory, which is focused on moving the database itself over online, and you obtaining the support through your partner for the other work.
And if you're doing an SMA through Microsoft, the free assessment, there's an architect involved, and they'll tell you whether things can or cannot be done, but they generally don't make a suggestion on a product because we try to stay impartial. Whether it's, like I said, Kingswaysoft, Scribe, they all to us do the same thing. We're not partial to one or the other, and we can say yes, it can be done, or yes, they have articles that change your endpoint from straight to the database to a web API. We'll tell you the generic stuff, but we're not going to go into the deep dive on the hows. That's really where you need your partner, and unfortunately, we just don't have the bandwidth to do all that.
Yeah, maybe it's useful here to mention that while we are talking a lot about the OP2L migration where you're doing a lift and shift of the actual database backup, the other alternative to migrating a database that was briefly mentioned is a data migration using those similar tools, the ETL tools. there's some downsides to that, moving record by record like that. For example, your audit trail doesn't come along with it. But there's a number of third-party tools available to use that method if that's your chosen method. The factory only works on the lift and shift model though.
And the SMA is a standard migration assessment, and Nicole or somebody, I don't know if you have the link handy, but we can send out the link to request an SMA. And I'm going to push live. Praveen answered that. Okay, do we have any other questions?
Or Jamie, maybe are there any other considerations folks should be thinking about? I know we ran through a lot today, but anything else that's sort of top of mind that, in your opinion, organizations should be thinking about as they, move from SMA and beyond to migrating?
Yeah, I think one consideration I think to think about is the timing, because this fiscal year, for Microsoft starts in July here. We're gonna, be emphasizing to our customers to move as quickly as possible. And part of the reason for that is that, the online version of our product is maturing and taking on more characteristics of the Azure environment. And as such, the code base will be diverging from what exists on premise, and over time it'll be more and more difficult to migrate online. So now's a good time, kind of an inflection point where you can migrate fairly easily, but the longer you wait, the more difficult it will become to do these migrations. So just consider that, and if you have any intention of getting online, my suggestion would be to make it part of your plan sooner rather than later.
And we know the new version for on-prem just got released, I think, a month ago. And that's, if you're going to upgrade on-prem, you might want to think about going online instead and thinking about the different options you have. Because as Jamie said, on-prem releases are getting less, frequent and less frequent, where they're committed to the online upgrades every 6 months. And the new features are limitless. I mean, every day, maybe I'm just a big geek, but I get excited to see the release notes on the different sections and find out what the new features are going to do.
Yes, I'd like to add one more point regarding CRM 2011. Microsoft ended the support for CRM 2011, I think last month. So if you have CRM 2011 instances to migrate, so this is the time, bring them on.
Yeah. So I think, we have no more questions but, like I said, if you have questions, catch the forum, the community, sessions. We have tons of people answering that, including myself, and, happy to answer any questions if you want to reach out. But, it is a fun time to be in the cloud. And I'm telling you, Jamie and Praveen, there's no one smarter than those two for helping you out, because they're my go-to people, and they are the nicest in the world. So they're always ready to answer the question.
Yeah, and this link here, that's why I pulled this back up. This link here will take you right to the community, so you can sign up and start asking those questions today. If we didn't get to them, or something comes to you later on today as you maybe think about this presentation and maybe watch it again. So
there's one more question around, like, how long could a migration? It depends on the size of the database as well as how complex your customizations are. And the good indicator, or the good way to find out the end-to-end timeline, is actually attempting the first test migration. So I highly recommend to start the first test migration to get an idea on end-to-end timelines.
All right, well, thank you for your time, everybody. And feel free to reach out on the migration community if you have any questions.